Community Health Cloud allows providers that are part of the patient's care team to be aware of updates to the patient's care as well as to communicate with each other regardless of the organizations they belong to. At the heart of this process is the patient themselves. The patient is able to manage which organization's data they want to share with other members of their care team. I'm going to log in now as a clinical staff member to show you what this looks like. When I log into the Community Health Cloud, I'm taken to my notification listing, which shows me all of the notifications that have come in. These notifications may be manual notifications that have been sent by other members of the patient's care team, or they could be automated notifications, as you see here. There are two types of automatic notifications that are available within Community Health Cloud. The first are notifications for hospitalization events that occur. So these could be admits or discharges or emergency room visits that occur within the hospitals in the community. When these events occur, that information is sent to Community Health Cloud, and notifications are created based on the patient's care team. Also within the automatic notifications are appointments for visits with providers that are part of the care team. The consent for viewing this information is managed by the patient themselves. So with these notifications, you get some detailed information about what's going on with that patient. Additionally, you have the ability to look at the patient's community record, and this is accomplished by either a timeline view or a longitudinal view of the patient's record. Let's take a look at those. If I launch the timeline view, by default it takes me into a view that shows me what's occurred with this patient during the last 3 months. I have the ability to zoom out to the patient's entire record or to some predefined date ranges that may be of interest to me. The timeline view allows me to see clinical events that have occurred for this patient across time. I can see immunizations, medications, allergies, problems, procedures, results, hospitalizations, social history, and vitals. The timeline allows me to move around within the patient's timeline or to zoom in and out. So if I wanted to get more detailed information about when certain events occurred, I can zoom into the patient's clinical record and zoom all the way down to a date range so I can see physically when things have occurred on what dates. I can still move through the patient's timeline to look for other events that have occurred for this patient. By clicking on an item within the timeline, I'm able to see details about what occurred on that date. Here I can see vitals measurements that were taken on this patient on March 9th. They include a heart rate, a systolic blood pressure, a diastolic blood pressure, a temperature, weight, a BMI, a respiratory rate, as well as a height. The details for each of those items are available on the right-hand side. One of the strengths of Community Health Cloud is the ability to communicate with other members of the care team. As such, all clinical data elements can generate notifications to other members of the care team. The envelope icon allows me to create this notification. Once I've selected to create the notification, I have the ability to select the user I wish to send this notification to. I can send to individual users or to groups of users. I can then define the message that I want to include with that notification. Once received, this notification will include the message as well as a link so I can view that clinical data element directly. The other view that's available is the longitudinal record of the patient. By clicking on this icon, I can go there now. The longitudinal view will show me the CCDA history for this patient, what CCDAs have I received and where have they come from, again based on consent that has been provided by the patient. View upcoming appointments for the patient, members of the patient's care team, as well as visit metrics that would display hospitalizations the patient has had within the past 6 months and year. Also, I have tabs for each of the different clinical data elements that make up the patient's Community Health Cloud record. I can view allergies, inactive medications, active medications, results, vitals, procedures, immunizations, social history, hospitalizations, providers, and problems. Additionally, results and vitals allow me to trend data for the patient. So for example, if I come into the result view and I open up their CMP here, I can see data from multiple different CMP events that have occurred. I have the ability to trend those results. So if I wanted to look at their glucose over time, I could do that and I would see a trend of what that data looks like. I have the same option available to me for vitals. I can trend vitals information as well. As with the timeline view, all clinical data elements can be messaged to another provider via notification. If I want to make the patient's cardiologist aware of a lab test result, for example, I could do that from the primary care clinic. What we're going to do now is log out of Community Health Cloud and log back in as a patient. When I log back in as the patient, I'm immediately taken to my consent selection. I would see all organizations where I am a patient. I can control consent at the organization level by either selecting to allow data from that organization to be viewed by other members of my care team or by not allowing that to occur. Additionally, I have the ability to set a default consent for future facilities. If I choose to do so and set a default consent, Community Health Cloud will use that consent for any new data that appears in the cloud from new organizations. The patient also has access to view the same clinical data that the providers and clinical staff members are looking at. By default, this takes me to my longitudinal view where I can view everything that my providers are looking at. I also have access to the same timeline view that the providers do. Additionally, as the patient, I'm able to view the history of what's occurred with my data within the Community Health Cloud. I can see which organizations and which users have accessed my data to view the information. So not only do I have the ability to control consent to make this data visible or not to other members of my care team, but I also have the ability to view what other members of my care team have looked at. A very powerful tool that puts the patient in control of their data within the community. Thank you.